What do you do here on campus at UCO?
Okay, I'm a psychology professor. I've been here, I think this is my 19th year. I teach psychology classes in the undergrad program and in the master's program. So I'm one of the counseling faculty, so I train master's level therapists.
Awesome. And so for your undergrad and graduate school, what schools did you attend?
I came here to UCO for my undergrad. I got a bachelor's in special education, and so I taught learning disabilities for about 3 years in a local high school. And then I got my master's here as well in experimental psychology, and then I got my PhD at OU in the counseling psychology.
Okay, and so when did you have your first child?
So that was at the end of the 3 years that I taught high school learning disabilities. I had my first child and was going to take a year off to just stay home, but I ended up, I decided to go on and get a master's degree then. And I didn't actually know what I wanted to do. I was going to get a master's initially in special ed, and then I took some of the psychology classes and decided, well, I really enjoyed that. In fact, when I taught high school, so I was teaching this learning disabilities class, but I did a lot of counseling, and I had no counseling experience, but the students just needed to talk. They had troubled lives and troubled families and felt bad about their disability, and so I talked to a lot of kids about their issues. And again, I think I like teaching a lot, of course, but you know, I found that being able to listen and help someone by being there for them when they really sometimes didn't have anybody else, that was very powerful for me, and so that's how I gravitated towards counseling.
Yeah. Now, after you had your first child, did you have more children after that, or just?
Yes, about almost 4 years later, so I was in the master's program, and I was going to get my master's in counseling, but then got it in experimental because they were advising us then, which is not the case now, but they were advising us that if we were thinking about a PhD program to go ahead and get it in experimental. So I'd taken almost all the classes in counseling, and then but I ended up getting an experimental degree. And it was in the last year of that degree that I got pregnant with triplets, which was quite shocking and wonderful, but shocking. And so I had to stop. I finished up one class, kind of via correspondence, is what they used to call it, and I, you know, was basically on bed rest for the last 20 weeks of that pregnancy. And but I ended up having 3 healthy girls, and it was a wonderful thing. Mm-hmm. I had to wait then for 2 years. I waited till they were 2 to go back to try to finish, which honestly is the hardest thing I have ever done, was finishing up my master's. It was harder than the whole PhD program, just because I had 4 kids, 3 of which were 2-year-olds. So writing and being gone to research, I mean, it was very, very, very challenging. But I think that's the thing, you just have to keep going. You have to just keep doing it and keep working at it till you get it done. I mean, perseverance counts for a lot when you're trying to go through an education. I mean, it really is just, it would have been easy to have not finished that. It would have been easier to have not finished that degree. So yeah, it was a challenge, but worth it.
Yeah. Now, how long did it take you total to finish your degree up into doctorates?
Let's see, I took those 2 years off between the kids, and then after I finished my master's, I worked at St. Anthony's Hospital in physical rehab in the neuropsychology department for 6 years. And that's when I went back to to get the PhD. I waited until the triplets were starting school full time. So when they started first grade, that was the year that I applied. And And then I was there for 4 years, 5 actually.
But what do you feel like were some of your biggest obstacles going through school and having children?
Yeah, so early on, it wasn't, like before I had children and after when I had my first child, you know, that was pretty regular stuff. When I had the triplets, it was challenging, and really part of it was just taking breaks from school, because a lot of times people take breaks and they don't ever come back. And even in my undergrad, I went to school for 2 years, took a year off and worked in a doctor's office, and then came back to finish that up. So it was, there were times when I chose to take a break, times when I had to take a break. So again, it was a matter of deciding to go forward even when I could have been distracted doing something else, you know. And then whenever I was working at St. Anthony's, so that's after the triplets were born, I got a divorce, which was very upsetting and kind of upset the whole apple cart completely. And it was hard then to have to try to have a professional life and have aspirations to go get a PhD and be a good mother all at the same time. And I'm telling you, there were times, once I entered the PhD program, I continued to work at St. Anthony's half-time during that, and there were times I felt like I wasn't doing any of those things well. You know, I was doing my job, but I wanted to give 100% to all of them, and it was just impossible. I mean, so I think that was really hard. I didn't like the feeling that I was spread so thin, both at my job and at school and being a mother. So luckily I had a good support system that helped. My mother helped a whole lot with the kids when they were growing up. And I know some students don't have that, and I think that really adds a challenge. You really have to have help and support so that you can spend the time doing the things that you need to do. I did a lot of things at night after the kids went to bed. I wrote my entire thesis from 9 to 12. That was the times I wrote, because that was the only time I really had.
Yeah. Now, what are some things that you think, or that you wish might have been available to you possibly on campus to help out, or just in general while you were trying to pursue your degree?
I feel like there probably were things that were available that I didn't even know about or take advantage of. And I find that a lot with our students, is that there are resources. They'll come to me and they'll say, oh, I'm having this trouble. And I say, well, did you know on campus we have this service? You know, we have someone who can help you with writing, or we have someone, or if you're depressed, you can get counseling. And there's a food pantry. I mean, there's a lot of things that people probably could make use of that they don't. And here at UCO, I don't think there was anything that I didn't have that I needed, actually. Or at least not that I knew of, you know,
Yeah.
There wasn't anything that I knew of. So I got the kind of support academically that I needed. And it was just, you know, the challenge was time management and being able to kind of orchestrate everybody being where they were supposed to be and getting things done. So really it was just challenging to make all that happen, because I just had a lot of things I was responsible for.
Yeah. Now, is there anything that you would want someone to hear that is thinking about pursuing a degree, or in the midst of pursuing a degree and they're struggling as far as motivation?
Yeah, I think that it feels sometimes like the world is conspiring against you when things happen. Like sometimes, you know, I have students whose houses burn down, or their apartment floods, or they lose their housing. And, you know, and sometimes it will, you know, there's just no way to avoid taking a break for a semester, and nobody wants to do that, and I would never want to do that either. But it's all about just hanging in there, you know, and sometimes you have to wait, and it's not like you can only get your degree this year. No, you can get it, you can finish next year, you can finish the year after that. It's it's different for everybody. And my path took a long time. I mean, I finished my PhD later than a lot of people do, but it was the only path I could take. I mean, I just did what I had to do, and I really don't have any regrets. I just think that sometimes I was very fortunate in some of the opportunities that came by, but certainly some of the, part of it is really just sticking with what you want and getting it done. It just takes a lot of fortitude, I think, sometimes, and you just got to hang with. And really, I had, there were times when things happened that really made me wonder about everything. I mean, I questioned everything. For example, after finishing the 3 years of studying it for the PhD, I was supposed to go on an internship. And you have to apply for that as well, so you have to apply to get into grad school, and then you apply to get into your internship. And I didn't, applied in Oklahoma, but in surrounding states as well, because it's very competitive. And I found one, and I got offered one in Little Rock, Arkansas. It was a really good program. They were very family friendly. They didn't want you to work 80 hours a week. They, kept it at a regular amount. I had already found a house and a church and a school for the kids, and my ex-husband took me to court to keep me from taking the kids. And so I had been a regular parent, very consistent, all that stuff, and he had not been. And so I really didn't think there was any way they would keep me from finishing my education. And so I was shocked when I remember the judge said, yeah, you can go on your internship, you're just not going to take the kids. I was like, what? I was just, you can tell, it still makes me angry, And so, so everyone, there were 8 of us in the program at OU, everyone went on their internship except me. I had to ask St. Anthony's for my job back, and I had to go back and work. That year was awful. I was depressed. I gained about 20 pounds, and seriously, I was working at St. Anthony's half-time, and I had to piece together other jobs just to make, just to pay the bills. I mean, it was a terrible, terrible year. I wouldn't wish that on anybody. But I applied the next year, and I got an internship here in Oklahoma and was able to finish. So I just had to live through a very, very, very challenging year. I do not look back on that year with any kind of, it's not one of those memories you have that, oh yeah, I remember what. So no, that was, it was awful in every way, emotionally and financially and academically. It was just, that's a year, so that made me a year late, and I was already kind of a late bloomer in many ways. So yeah, that's probably was the most challenging event that happened, was being denied the ability, and I wasn't about to leave him here. I wasn't going to leave him for a year. I have friends who did that, who left their kids with their husbands, and husbands do this with their wives as well sometimes when it's necessary, but that was not an option for me. I mean, I wouldn't have, I couldn't. I mean, it would not have been a stable environment. So.
Well, thank you for sharing your story. We are definitely glad to be able to add this to our list of other testimonials that we'll share with women looking to go to school or struggling with their degree and that motivation. So we definitely appreciate it.
Well, you're very welcome. I'm happy to tell it, and I hope it's helpful to someone. That would be amazing.